introduce our next presenter, Asi Burak, if we can get a hand. And it's like I said earlier, Esports, from Madison Square Garden to world peace. Asi Burak is the chairman of Games for Change and chief business officer at Tilting Point. Burak is an award-winning video game and digital technology executive and was named one of the, quote, Digital 25 Leaders in Emerging Entertainment by the Producers Guild of America, PGA, and Variety magazine. Burak co-wrote Power Play, How Video Games Can Save the World, and is a faculty member at the School of Visual Arts, MFA in Design for Social Innovation.
Thank you.
Let's take it away.
Do you hear me? Yeah, you hear me well? Okay. So it's great to be here today. There was a different plan that will first be with the mayor, but that will happen next week. There is a big announcement which I'm excited about. You heard the introduction. I'm really in the city for many years. It's not a leading city in games yet, which is interesting because if you think about it, New York is leading in media and finance and fashion and a lot of things, and even in VR, XR, but in video games per se, it's actually behind. There are many reasons for that, but I guess that we're trying to change it. What I'm going to show you today is a short version of a longer talk that I'm giving in relation to the book that I published a few years ago. But the main concept is about how games can actually make a positive difference in the world. This is something that I dedicated a lot of time to with a great community. Nick is part of it. A community that Barry helped found one of the prominent organizations, Games for Change. And now I'm the chair, but Barry, together with two other individuals, made it happen. And what I'm going to try today is do even something a bit more ambitious, not only video games with social change, but esports with social change. So a bit context about how I got into this. I call it a little game about peace. Was born in Israel, which is a tiny place. It's so tiny that the yellow dot is covering it and two other countries around it. At the age of 33, I made a decision, and school, academia really changed the course of everything I'm doing. And that decision was to move from Israel to the US, but we'll talk about it. Let's talk about what does it mean to live in Israel. You grew up in a conflict environment. It's coming in waves. By the way, right now, I don't know if you follow the news, we are in an active wave, but this is a drawing that I really did. It's an authentic drawing when I was 5 years old, that my mother saved. And I can compare it today. I have two girls living in New York and drawing very different things, very different topics. So this is the psyche of what you grew up with. Then no matter what, even if you try to avoid it, at the age of 18 you go to the army. This is me, if you can't, this was many years ago, you can't recognize. And basically you are immersed. I was in intelligence corps, which takes you in a even deeper to the idea that you need to think like the other side. You need to figure out what the other side is trying to do. You get into their head and you're trying to basically block certain schemes, certain attacks, certain plans that the other side is trying to do, okay? In Israel, we're dealing with many sides because we have neighboring countries, but we also have attacks that come from within Israel, from the occupied territories. All of that to say that the conflict was much in my, upbringing, and was also leading my foray into video games. I mentioned earlier that I came to the US. I came to Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, master's degree, and then I was introduced for the first time to this concept of serious games. It was very early. I even met Barry as a student, at 2004. When serious games was really maybe a year, 2 years old, and the idea that you could do something with video games that is much more than entertainment. I go to the Carnegie Mellon program. Randy Pausch is a name that would be interesting if I could put a bookmark, do your search later, and look for the last lecture. Randy Pausch did something that became very famous and very inspiring. He did this lecture before he died at the age of 46. He knew he was about to die. That was the context for this lecture. And it became viral. It was on every talk show back then in the day. And you'll see why he's such an interesting and inspiring personality and a teacher. And I was lucky to meet him when he was still actively teaching. And I went and pitched the following idea. I'm going to make a game about the Middle East conflict, the stuff I grew up on, some probably seeds from my intelligence work, because it was about how do I understand the two sides, okay? And what I'm going to show you now is his response, which was framed in much more diplomatic ways, but that was the feedback. To the faculty's benefit and credit, I would say that after some convincing, they let us run with it as students, and it became later a commercial project. And I want to show you a 2-minute video so you see a bit the color and how the media, for example, responded and how the game looked. Again, very old-fashioned. We're talking about 15 years ago, but you'll get the sense of what we tried to achieve.
Peacemaker is a game in which you take the role of one of the leaders. You can take either the role of the Israeli Prime Minister or the Palestinian President. You can play both perspectives. And the idea is that as the leader, you have to react to real-time events happening in the world. You can negotiate with other leaders, but you also have security or military actions that you can take. And by doing so, you have to reach a peaceful solution while in office.
In an Israeli high school, a new computer game called Peacemaker was launched today. Children playing the role of Israeli and Palestinian leaders trying to make peace in a virtual world of suicide bombings and Israeli military strikes.
We don't expect to address all issues of the conflict. We don't expect to give all the answers. We're bringing up issues for discussion.
I think the best aspect of playing this game is that, especially if you're Palestinian student in the territories or an Israeli student within Israel, you get a chance to really feel what both sides are thinking and get a better sense of what they can do together to work towards peace.
If you look at the video game industry today, there are so many games out there about violence, about war, about destructions. We say a simple thing: there is certainly a place for one little game about peace.
This is a much younger and more naive version, but basically this is what we did. It got a lot of attention because it was early, because it was a group of students. It was the most complex issue you could probably imagine, and we also did some interesting things like the two perspectives that you can switch, and you saw the real footage. The idea that we chose to bring actual Reuters footage into it. Anyway, this is kind of where I started from. Then I was lucky to lead Games for Change, and now I'm the chairman. And I'm going to fast forward from Peacemaker and Games for Change to esports. So something like 7 years ago, I decided to stop leading the organization and do a bit of consulting, and I did it with a partner that was very senior at the time. I mean, you know, before that at Activision Blizzard, and he was there when esports just started, professionally and globally. He made some of the first deals in Korea for StarCraft and other titles. And we started doing those consulting projects, and we tried to do them as kind of boutique, big things that move the needle. And I told you that I care about New York, and I care about, developing New York. So we got Tribeca, the film festival, coming to us and saying, we want to start doing something with games, right? What can it be? And the other thing that they told us is, we started this partnership with Madison Square Garden. They are now our partners. So Itzik, my partner, because of his background, immediately said, Esports, let's bring it to Madison Square Garden. And this is what we did. Obviously, it wasn't overnight. It took a lot of convincing because the situation was like this. Madison Square Garden, until then, the only esports stuff that they did was Dota, which is, by the way, not the right title to do in the US in terms of audiences. It's probably much more appropriate in Asia and other places. But they did Dota, and they did it in the smaller theater, which is 5,000 seats. The arena can go up to 18,000, so 4x. And the other thing is that they did it with ESL. ESL is now a huge esports tournament organizer, but it's not a first-party publisher. And we told them, look, guys, and I didn't mention, they could sell only a third of the tickets to the theater. So their initial experience with it was not good. It cannot work in the arena. We're going to embarrass ourselves. What we told them, and Itzik knew all those guys from Riot, because they started, when he was at Blizzard, they started modding the Blizzard products to get to League of Legends. So he knew them when they just began. So we called them, and we told them, guys, let's do something big at Madison Square Garden. We told Madison Square Garden, forget what you've done before. Here we're talking about Riot. They are going to do it because they did it in LA Staples and they sold everything in one day. And we assure you that this is the right right thing to do. It was much more expensive than the alternative in Chicago. So that's what Riot needed to. Anyway, we bridged both. And we were in the place where we could speak both languages, because one party speaks business, one party speaks games, experience. And at the end of the day, we did it. I'm going to show you a short video. Obviously, since then, we saw dozens and dozens and dozens of esports events. But that was an important one because this is the most famous arena in the world. This is New York City. And it was a bit of a moment, one of the moments for esports to come out of the closet, because all the media was there. ESPN saw it for the first time. And that was kind of, you can't put esports in a better arena in that regard. And the last point here is that they sold out in 24 hours, 2 days, national championship, moving it from Chicago to New York, 11,000 tickets, because when you do an esports event, you need to move to preserve some of the blocks of space for the stage and all that. It was a great success. You'll see 40 seconds of that video that Tribeca did.
It's a really cool experience to have every person around you like the thing that you like.
It really has changed my life. I absolutely love this game.
It's one of those games that whether we're having a good day or a bad day, we know if we play, we're going to have a good time and we're going to be better off for it.
Okay, so we're close to the end of this, but what I wanted to share with you is that, for many years I did more projects in esports together with my partner. We helped to form a university in Russia, that one of the first ones that had an esports program and research. We helped Washington, D.C., their events authority. They own a lot of the venues in the city. It's different than New York that the venue are private, and they wanted to get into esports, and we helped them to buy a team and get them into Washington, D.C., all kinds of pioneering things in esports. But then I'll ask you the question, why am I connecting the two? You saw, I told you one story about a peace game. I'm now telling you a story about being involved in esports. What's the connection? This is super commercial, that is kind of do-goodery, non-profit ideas.
That's a game that, well, in the case of Peacemaker, that's a game where you're trying to not entirely solve the conflict, but just try and find like a peaceful middle ground between both warring conflicts, since it is such a wide and complex narrative that you're trying to unpack. And with the League of Legends thing, it's basically, as you said, esports coming out of the closet to create a very big event that can really put esports on the map. So I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to show the two drastic sides that gaming can have to impact not just like the place where it is, but just the people too, because in both cases, Peacemaker and League of Legends, they both had a way of bringing people together in a way that hasn't really been conveyed before. I think that's what the true power of gaming is.
That's definitely a true angle, and also the idea of taking games to another place, you know, pushing the boundaries of what people think about video games, but more ideas. Let's think about esports specifically. How esports and do-gooder, we have time, Barry? You were okay? How it's connected? What's the connection? Okay, so I'll jump ahead. We're short of time, but the idea is that the way I looked at esports for many years, and I'm not the only one, obviously, is just like trying to equate it with the values of traditional sports. Let's be honest, you know, we're not naive. Both sports and esports have a lot of negative sides as well, and people that abuse it or, you know, take it to negative places. But there are those values that we can see and sometimes we can actually execute on. The Olympics is one of them, you know, the idea that nations, even if they are somewhat in conflict, can work together. Excellence, leadership, teamwork, discipline, you know, get people to do something they like passionately and thrive in it. So all those things I always saw in esports as well and always try to highlight. And in one of my presentations, I put this kind of to loop in the whole concept of Peacemaker in is the idea that maybe one day we'll see an esports competition between Israel and Palestine. And I did this presentation, someone came to me and said, you know, I mean, you put it as a dream, but it could be doable maybe. So I tried a bit, I go to both sides and I do think it's possible. Maybe in the right timing, in the right climate. So far, the only thing that we succeeded to do at Games for Change is a bit related, is a program that is now funded by the US State Department, where we have in Israel, the US, Bahrain, and the Emirates, a program about students making games and cultural exchange and a contest at the end between all those countries. So not exactly that, but on the way. Thank you, guys.